Welcome to Optimal Frequency. I'm Grant. I talk to spirits here at my house using a method I developed. Last week, as I was reviewing some of the older footage I'd shot, I came across two sessions I did on Elizabeth Barton and King Henry VIII, where I sat down and I asked them questions one after the other, not trying to antagonize them, but I wanted to get their opinion from each side. And it was amazing to me, those sessions. It seemed like Elizabeth Barton, who was beheaded, right? And her head was put on the London Bridge because she had a conflict with King Henry VIII. It seemed like they were still arguing 500 years later. The voices I recorded were definitely, it said they were not friends. Wow, I'm getting big waves of goosebumps down here. Anyways, I've loaded up the original audio and then I filtered it with the new Crystal Sound artificial intelligence software that I'm using. And I need to go through this piecemeal. It's probably going to take me 3 days to find out if the responses I get after using the new software correspond with what we got when we used the CRISP software the first time. Am I going to get King Henry VIII and Elizabeth Barton still arguing? Are their answers going to be intelligent to the questions I ask? Which I think they are, because we've seen this every time I do this. Doesn't matter what software I use, the answers come through, they make sense. You'll hear a woman's voice, you'll hear a man's voice. Let's see what we can find. Before I start, one thing I did notice which was odd. So at this particular session, I kept the Sony camera with me at the sync, which is this top track. You can see when I ask a question here, my voice was nice and loud. And then this bottom track is the Panasonic camera, which was over at my wife's computer. And I have already amplified this entire track by 16 decibels because that's how quiet it was. Now, I don't know why it was that quiet. Anyways, let's jump into it and see what we can find. New Panasonic camera, Sony camera, both recording. Test, test, test. I just turned it down here at the mic. Sounds good. "20 questions, 10 for each of King Henry and Elizabeth Barton. Good early morning to you, spirits." Said my prayer of protection. Can you please tell me the name of the man I asked you to bring forward? Okay, so I'm just going to throw this out there so you know what I'm thinking and doing as I'm going through this and what I'm paying attention to. So it was like almost a year to the day I did this 2 different sessions, okay? So in the original session, the Sony camera said, you also have peace. And then I showed you that when I ran it through the software, the Crystal Sound, that I've recently been using, it was almost an identical message, only the word you was gone, and it says, also have peace. So this time when I asked for King Henry's name, I'll show you what was said the first time a year ago when I ran this through the Chris software. It says something about we guard this gate, nice to see you, something like that. It's totally different wording this time, but it kind of makes sense. So if you picture spirits, and I've opened a portal, somebody's, whoa, huge goosebumps, just like lightning hit me down this arm. If I've opened a portal at that sink and I'm waiting and I'm talking to these spirits, and my spirit guards are watching it, and the guy says, hey, we guard this gate, as another spirit's running up to talk to me, right? He says, nice to see you, we guard this gate. Makes sense. Now, pay attention to this message when I run it through this software. It's along that vein, it continues to make sense, even though it's a completely different sentence. One final note that I want to make about this, I know I'm talking a lot, but this is super important, right? So I've taken footage that I shot with 2 cameras, and I ran it through Crisp last year, and we got all kinds of messages. Seemed to make sense talking about King Henry and Elizabeth Barton. So like I said, this experiment was to take that exact same footage, run it through the new artificial intelligence software, and see what messages we get. If this was totally random crap that didn't make any sense, let me pose this question to you. Why now today, as I've only listened to maybe 5 responses, right, or a few responses that I've gone through, why do they keep saying my name, Grant? They're not talking about Bob. They're not talking about Dave, Doug, or John. It's always Grant. It makes sense that these messages are for me, like I said, even though I'm using a secondary software now. Just think about it. Think about how many times you've heard them say Grant today. And I'm not talking about the original responses. Please say the name of the woman I've asked for you to bring forward. Okay, let's jump into these. Elizabeth Barton and King Henry VIII. Do you now get along peacefully on the other side, or do you still hate each other? Elizabeth, did you truly receive divine revelations that predicted events, or was this a lie to elevate your standing? When you became King of England, Henry, was it your intention to rule justly? So there's another example of them telling me something I didn't know. Had no clue, never even gave it a thought. King Henry VIII was a teenager when he became king. Now, I didn't bother looking it up until they said he was a teenager. And then I'm like, well, is that right? Now, somebody out there is going to say, well, you could have looked that up before and learned it. Yeah, I could have, but why would I have? It's just an example of these voices telling me information that is pertinent. And again, I personally didn't know that information.
Elizabeth, please choose which title you believe aptly describes you. Is it A, the Nun of Kent, B, the Holy Maid of Kent, C, the Holy Maid of London, D, the Mad Maid of Kent? A, B, C, or D?
So just a quick interjection here. On the first videos I did using the CRISP software, they also picked, out of the 4 possible answers, they picked B, and they said the same thing. They said, Mad, no, you can actually get rid of that last answer, which was D, the Mad Maid of Kent. And this time they said, pick B, it's better than the last one, it ain't right. So, I mean, 2 different softwares running through these responses, and yet we come up with a multiple choice answer that both leads to B. I think it was the Holy Maid of Kent. So, something to think about anyways, right? If this was total nonsense, what are the chances that we would actually hear the response B? Now, go back and listen to it a few times because it's very subtle, where they say, the first thing they say is, that's B. I'm putting on the screen what I'm hearing. If you go back one response, you hear 2 guys talking. He says, I don't want to pick one. And the other guy says, pick the same one. Right after I asked them to choose from a multiple choice question. To me, that's making sense. They don't want to pick one of the 4 answers.
King Henry, do you ultimately feel that you abused your power as king? Elizabeth, as your popularity grew, you garnered the attention of powerful enemies. Did this scare you? King Henry, were your duties too overwhelming, or did you enjoy your life of opulence? Elizabeth, did you lead a life of servitude to the people, or was it your goal to become more famous? King Henry, did you respect the women of your time? Elizabeth, do you feel you were used as a pawn by powerful men? King Henry, I read a claim that you ordered the executions of anywhere between 57,000 and 72,000 people. If this is true, do you now think you should have been more lenient? Elizabeth, was King Henry VIII a tyrant? Henry, did you hate Elizabeth for challenging your power? Around 1532, Elizabeth, you began to prophesy the king's death if he remarried. Were these prophecies true, or were you trying to control the king? Henry, many vicious rumors about Elizabeth being mentally ill and having sexual relations with priests were started. Did you play a role in these rumors? Elizabeth, in 1533, you were arrested and forced to confess that you had fabricated.
Okay, so this is with the new software filtered. I want to show you guys this because this is the part where I started talking. I said Elizabeth, and I started asking her a question, but then my throat seized up. And so in the original video with the crisp filtering on the Panasonic camera, which is right here, she says, my throat. Okay, so I'm going to show you, I'm going to play this. I've amplified both, but just so you can hear me talking, okay? And then I'll show you what it says in between each one. So here you'll hear my talking.
Elizabeth, in 1533, you were arrested.
Okay, so Elizabeth, and then I left a little pause as I took a breath. I said, in 1533, you were arrested. So in that pause on the top camera, somebody says, yes. Okay, and then right below it, as I showed you guys in the other video, on this camera, it says the exact same thing it said the first time I filtered it with the different software, my throat. And right after they said my throat, as I continue the question, my throat seizes up, and you can see me going like this, and I even comment on it later on.
Elizabeth, in 1533, you were arrested and forced to confess that you had fabricated your revelations. Did they torture you to obtain this confession? Just got like something in my throat all of a sudden. I don't know if that had something to do with her response or not. Henry, in 1534, at the age of 28, Elizabeth and 5 of her chief supporters were hanged for treason. Did this please you? Elizabeth, you are the only woman in history to have your head impaled on a pike and displayed on London Bridge. How do you feel about this? King Henry, if I gave you the chance right here, right now, to apologize to Elizabeth Barton, would you do so? Just had a big whoosh across my neck of tingles. Okay, this is for both of you. Should men and women be afforded the right to live their lives peacefully without the gross interference of a governing body or head of state such as a king or queen? Elizabeth, do you have a message for the people? King Henry, do you have a message for the people? All right, thank you both. I'm going to send out some light. Love, peace, joy, and adventure to both of you and to my team. Thank you for coming through. Love, peace, joy, and adventure to you viewers. I got a feeling this is going to be an interesting session. We'll catch you in the next one. If you are intrigued by the research I'm doing here and you think that I might actually be onto something, feel free to like, subscribe, and share with your friends who may also enjoy the material. You can check out our Reddit community over on the Reddit page, r/optimal frequency. If you want to donate like these folks have on the screen, you can use the donate button on the top of the YouTube banner. Every dollar is appreciated. Love, peace, joy, and adventure to all of you. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you in the next video.